We'd like to thank you for tuning in for another episode of Looking to Jesus. My name is John Hines, preach for the Church of Christ in North Ridgeville, Ohio. My co-host is.
Daniel Sanders, and I preach for the Quail Valley Church of Christ in Batesville, Arkansas. Good to see you today, John.
Yep, good to see you, Daniel. Hope you're doing well.
We
Sitting
are
there,
survived
sitting
all the
there
storms
drinking
and
from
everything.
Your
Yes,
Bucky's cup.
I'm looking forward to our Bucky's opening up here in the near
I-
future.
I've never been to Bucky's.
You need to go. Well, you got one. You're getting one close to you now in Mansfield.
Yeah? I,
They're going to open one up there.
what is that, an hour away from me?
Yeah,
Something like that.
no
I have to go
more.
check out the brisket sandwich.
That's the good one.
That's the good one.
Get the brisket XL.
Oh, that sounds tasty.
It is
All right, Daniel, what are we talking about today? We have been going through First Corinthians, correct?
correct.
All right, so last week we started talking about the conscience, being sensitive to the conscience, matters of liberties. You don't bind what God has not bound, right?
Yep.
And I think we're going to carry on with that discussion for chapter 9, aren't we?
Somewhat, and Paul talking about himself as an apostle and some of the things, working as a gospel preacher,
Yep.
some of the rights that they have with everything, and for people to be considerate of such things.
Different ways that he's denied himself.
Yeah,
All right, you want to start off reading or you want me to read?
I can start off reading this week.
Carry on, my wayward son.
First Corinthians chapter 9, beginning verse 1, it says, "Am I not an apostle? Am I not free? Have I not seen Jesus Christ our Lord? Are you not my work in the Lord? If I'm not an apostle to others, yet doubtless I am to you. For you are the seal of my apostleship in the Lord. My defense to those who examine me is this: do we have no right to eat and drink? Do we have no right to take along a believing wife, as do also the other apostles, the brothers of the Lord, and Cephas? Or is it only Barnabas and I who have no right to refrain from working? Whoever goes to war at his own expense? Who plants a vineyard and does not eat of its fruit? Or who tends a flock and does not drink of the milk of the flock? Do I say these things as a mere man? Or does not the law also say the same also? For it is written in the law of Moses, you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out grain. Is it oxen God is concerned about? Or does he say it altogether for our sakes? For our sakes, no doubt. This is written that he who plows should plow in hope, and he who threshes in hope should be partaker of this hope. If we have sown spiritual things for you, is it a great thing if we reap your material things? If others are partakers of this right over you, are we not even more? Nevertheless, we have not used this right, but endure all things lest we hinder the gospel of Christ. Do you not know that those who minister the holy things eat of the things of the temple, and those who serve at the altar partake of the offerings of the altar? Even so, the Lord has commanded those who preach the gospel should live from the gospel. That's First Corinthians chapter 9, verse 1 down to verse 14.
Okay. So you can tell from something he says there in the third or fourth verse, my defense to those who examine me is this. There were those in Corinth they were disparaging Paul.
Yeah,
And they were questioning a lot of things that Paul had taught. They were even questioning his apostleship. And he's like, don't you know I'm an apostle? They had the gifts. How did they have the gifts? Through the laying on of the apostles' hands.
right.
So it's like, you need to remember, and Paul's not being puffed up. He's
No.
like, I am an apostle. Those, those individuals were apostles.
And
And
again, he
so,
spent a year and a half there with these
right,
individuals.
right.
I think that's a key thing is that's not like it's a new thing. He's been there. He was there
Yeah,
for a good little bit, so they know him. As you mentioned about the gifts, they received it through the laying on of the apostles' hands. Well, how were they able to receive it? These are individuals who were also eyewitnesses of the resurrected Lord.
exactly. There in verse 1, have I not seen Jesus Christ our Lord?
Yeah.
And it's like, you Corinthians, have you seen him? No. I've seen him. The apostles have seen him. The apostles were the eyewitnesses. He says, are you not my work in the Lord? To your point, he was there a year and a half. This isn't Thessalonica where he was there 3 Sabbaths.
Right.
He's there for a year and a half. Like he knows them and they know him. So he says, my defense to those who examine me is this. And then he starts talking about his rights. And because that's the whole conversation about conscience and about liberties and about rights.
Yeah.
And so he starts talking about his rights. Do we have no right to eat and drink? And he's going to use this figure. He's going to talk about a few different things. But he's going to say, like he says in other places, and even earlier here in chapter 8, let's see up there at verse 8, but food does not commend us to God, for neither if we eat are we the better, nor if we do not eat are we the worse. That's just one example of rights. It's like, what do you do with your liberties? What do you do with your rights? And so
Yeah.
he says, it's like eating doesn't commend us one way or the other. We are at liberty. We have that right to eat or to not eat, and we think about others. But that's just one example. So then he goes on, right? He goes on and he starts talking specifically about himself. And so he starts talking about a believing wife. And he's like, do we have no right to take along a believing wife, as do the other apostles? There Peter is. What did Peter have?
Peter had a wife. We know that based upon the fact of him being an elder, and then as well, his wife's mother lay sick with a fever. So, and when Jesus
Right.
healed her. So we know that Peter had a wife as well, and other people came along the trip with their husbands and wives. For instance, another individual or couple that was held high regard in Corinth, Aquila and Priscilla. Did
Yeah.
they accompany Paul on some of his trip? Yeah, they left Corinth with Paul to go to Ephesus. And that's where we get introduced to where they worked with
Yeah.
Apollos. And they send a letter with Apollos back to Corinth to receive him in his work there. So other individuals, not just the apostles, but other individuals took their wives with them on some
Yeah.
of these trips.
I heard a good point. I can't remember if it was you or someone in the Bible class here. They're answering the question, can we prove that any of the apostles had children? We can prove that Peter was married, but and the person made a good point. Peter must have had children too because he's also an elder.
Right. Yeah.
And one of the qualifications to be an
I know.
elder is faithful children.
Right.
So Peter he was a family man.
Yeah.
Now, could Paul have been a family man?
He could have, because that gets us into 1 Corinthians 7, because he's talking about, I made the choice
Right.
of not marrying. I wish, I believe some of the terminology there in 1 Corinthians says, I wish you were as I am
Yeah.
when he's talking about marriage, but he did not condemn it. He just
Right.
made the choice. It's like what we read about earlier on with Jesus. There were some people that selected to play the role of a eunuch,
Right.
and
A
some
eunuch for the kingdom's sake.
a unit for the kingdom's sake made that choice to not involve or engage themselves in being able to in marital actions.
So, two individuals who we know did that are Paul and Barnabas, the two individuals spoken about here.
Right.
And Paul's argument is, don't we have the right to be married? And I would think those people in Corinth, I don't think they were saying that he couldn't be married. Paul's using himself and Barnabas as an example of those who have denied their rights for the sake of others.
Yeah.
And he's like, we could have done this, we chose not to.
Right.
And so I guess we should answer. It's like, well, why did he really choose not to be married? How would you answer that? It's like he
Why he
could have.
chose not to. He could have. He just chose not to because he wanted to devote himself to the gospel.
Yeah, I think that's a
His
simple enough
his
answer.
his focus, we see it when he I go back to when he was there in Damascus. When he was baptized, it says immediately he went in preaching and teaching things pertaining to the kingdom of God. And he was
Yeah.
already a well-taught man and being a Pharisee and being able to understand the law, and he just continued the furtherance of that and felt that it for him to be at his most effective point was to be able to go and preach the gospel. Did not have a wife.
A husband. Oh my goodness. This was about to branch off in a whole
Yeah.
different direction.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're right. Earlier in chapter 7 at verse 33, it says, but he who is married cares about the things of the world, how he may please his wife. Peter had to be concerned about his family. He had to be concerned about his wife. He had to be concerned about his children. Now, as he's going to face persecution, well, his family's going to suffer as the persecution intensifies.
Right.
Paul Paul was the chosen vessel to spread the Lord's name before Gentiles and kings. And Paul apparently deemed it best that he not marry. And, you know, I think your way of explaining it very clear. It's like he wanted to devote himself to the work of the gospel.
Well,
Very simply. So he chose not to marry. Barnabas, his traveling companion, chose the same thing. And so they didn't marry. So that's one right that he denied himself. So he's telling the Corinthians, if I denied myself in this, in having a family, it's like, can you all not please deny yourself when it just comes to barbecue and ground beef? Not ground beef, but anyway, meat sacrificed to idols,
yeah,
things along those lines. It's like,
right.
can you not think about others because we are thinking about you? And so deny yourself. So that's one example of how he's denied himself. But then he branches off to other things. Whoever goes to war at his own expense. And he starts using these figures like if you plant a vineyard, what do you eat of?
Well,
It's like,
I've had gardens out in my backyard. Yeah, I sometimes give it away, but one of the things I was doing, I was going to have part of it for myself.
yeah.
You
Oh,
know,
you're being selfish. You're being
raising
selfish.
different types of animals. We're going to try to raise some for meat. Guess what I was going to do? I was going to have some for myself. It's like, again, it's not whoever, but whoever, who in the right mind would go to war at their own expense?
Yeah.
Nobody. Nobody does. They're going to sit there and they're going to get, someone else to help fund their ventures with that.
Yeah. And
You
so
know,
what he's
go ahead.
talking about in these issues, and it's uncomfortable for us to talk about, and I freely admit that, he's talking about supporting preachers,
Yeah.
is what he's talking about. And he says, it is, for it is written in the law of Moses, you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain. Is it oxen God is concerned about? The sad thing is, a lot of folks, they would read that verse and they're like, oh, God's talking about the farm animals.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're talking about, as he says, verse 10, he says it all together for our sakes.
Yeah.
And he goes on,
Deeper
verse
meaning.
11. Do what?
I said there's deeper meaning. It's like the
Exactly.
parables. Don't take the parables just word for word. There's a deeper meaning, a deeper lesson behind it, just like with this.
Yeah.
Don't muzzle the ox. Is it as you said, is it the oxen? No, it's those who are working in the gospel.
So wait a minute. When the Lord said, consider the birds of the air, he didn't want us all to become bird watchers. Like,
No.
it's like, no, there's a lesson.
Yeah.
There's a lesson there. Verse 11, if we have sown spiritual things for you, is it a great thing if we reap your material things? And so, and you can show from the passage there in verse 12, if others are partakers of this right over you, the Corinthians were supporting somebody.
Yeah.
There were teachers there and they were supporting them.
And we see later on in 1 Corinthians 16 that they were also helping contribute as churches in Galatia were doing to be able to help support the brethren in Jerusalem who are going to be dealing with the
Yeah. At
famine.
least they
So
were told to.
yeah, they were told to, and but
Yeah.
they were taking into that
Right.
and helping support as
Right.
one of those examples later on.
And
But
so it speaks to the work of the church.
yeah,
It's like, Paul says again there, that verse you just mentioned there in chapter 16, as I gave orders to the churches of Galatia, you also on the first day of the week lay aside. So we're talking about the work of the church. Now, what's the work of the church? Part of it is benevolence, and a part of it is the work of the gospel. It's like the preaching of the gospel. And there are folks there in Corinth who they are supporting. And so Paul's argument is, as he talks about here and elsewhere, he didn't take a dime from the Corinthians.
right.
He had the right to. And he speaks pretty strongly about it. He had the right to demand it, but he didn't use that right. He didn't use that right. You want to go into why he didn't do that?
He didn't lord it over them, wanting them to be able to do it themselves. Understand?
Yeah.
Was
Where does he talk about this elsewhere? Well, let's see. Isn't it Second Corinthians? Well, let me go find that passage real quick. It's in Second Corinthians where he says, because this is one of the issues. It's Second Corinthians chapter 11 where he talks about this. He says that in verse 7, did I commit sin in humbling myself that you might be exalted because I preached the gospel of God to you free of charge? I robbed other churches, taking wages from them to minister to you. At the end of verse 9, I kept myself from being burdensome to you. And it goes on, and it sure does look like, to read that passage. And me and you were talking about this before we started recording. And this is the conundrum. This is the issue that sometimes happens. You reap physical things from the church. To use this language back in 1 Corinthians 9, if we have sown spiritual things for you, is it a great thing if we reap your material things? Well, sometimes when churches see you reaping material things, what do they say about you?
Make too much money.
It's like, oh, you're just doing it for the money.
Yeah.
You're just doing it for the money. And Paul, by denying his rights, he had the right to be supported by them. He didn't use that right, and that took that ammunition away from them. The Corinthians could never say, oh, well, you're just preaching here for the money. It's like, you guys ain't paying me a dime,
Yeah.
is what he's doing. He's denying himself. Did he have the right? Yes. And you can tell. He talks about this, I believe, I think with Timothy. There's a verse in Timothy that uses the same figure, I believe, of the ox, if I remember correctly. And it's like, listen, the law said this as well. How were the Levites and the priests provided for? It's like they were provided for out of the giving of Israel.
Yeah.
That's how their needs were seen to. So it was in the law, so it is under the new covenant. It's like those who preach the gospel, what should they live from?
Live
They
from
should
God.
live from the gospel. And sometimes, as preachers, mean you have that unique perspective. That's difficult to talk about.
Right.
From the church's perspective, sometimes churches have difficulty with it, because you're starting to talk about material things, frankly.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
anyway, it starts
Because
going down a bad
when
road.
it comes from our side of things, it all, some people will take it as greed.
Yeah.
Um, and so it makes it kind of difficult for us to be able to talk about some of these things. Even you and I, when we're talking in private, it's still uncomfortable for us to kind of talk about some of it. It's frustrating seeing those things, but again, you're the labor. We read later on First Timothy, the labor is worthy of the wages.
Yeah.
It starts talking about the elders that are serving in that capacity,
Yeah.
being able to help take care of them. Uh,
Daniel, let's look at it from a different perspective.
yeah.
Let's just talk about another business. Give me another business, any other business you want to.
All right, I'm certified heating and air conditioning technician. There you go.
Okay, heating and air tech. All right. So you're the business owner. You have employees, right? So
Yep,
that's the situation. Now, you're trying to make as much money as you can, aren't you?
sure.
Okay. So there's different ways to make as much money as you can. One way, so you have employees,
Yep,
and because you're a business owner and you're trying to make as much money as you can, well, what is one way that you could make more money? Well, you could pay your employees less.
yeah,
And you're thinking, well, the less I pay Johnny working for me, well, that's more money the business gets to keep.
right,
Now now from Johnny's perspective, how much does Johnny want to make? Well, Johnny wants to make more, right? The
right,
employee wants to make more. So now the employee is greedy and the employer is cheap,
yeah,
right? And you have that friction
right,
between a greedy employer and a greedy employee.
right, right,
Now, the sad thing is sometimes that same mindset creeps into the church.
yeah,
And it's like, well, we want to nickel and dime the preacher. And sometimes preachers, frankly, sometimes it's like there are greedy preachers. Paul talks about that in Philippians. Those who are just preaching for mercenary means.
yeah.
He talks about that. And it's like, no, what you have to do, because in those situations, back to the HVAC business. Daniel, do you have a name for your business? We'll just call it Daniel's HVAC.
Okay.
If you can keep nickel and diming your employee, now what's your employee going to do if you keep up that behavior?
Either they're going to quit or they're going to start doing work under the table, which takes away from me and they get more money in their pocket.
But if you will take care of your employer, or if you will take care of your employee, I should say, if you'll take care of your employee, what will they do?
They'll preach.
They'll take care of you effectively,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's a good relationship.
And that goes into the business side of everything. I believe Paul addressed that in one of his first or second Thessalonians, where it talks about how employers, be fair to your employees, and employees be
Right.
fair to your, that relationship there. Be honest and fair to both, on both sides
Yeah.
of everything.
So now the issue is between churches and preachers. Don't look at it as a business arrangement. It's like, no, don't look at it like that. Because preachers are not employees. It's like preachers work for the Lord, right? So now the question is, how much do you appreciate the gospel? How much do you appreciate the gospel? And for the preacher, the issue is you need to learn how to be abased and how to abound, but you also need to recognize you don't muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain.
Yeah,
So take care of your preacher. And preacher, take care of the church, take care of your work. Shepherds, take care of the flock. All of you submit to one another and take care of one another and love one another and care for one another. Is it really that big of a deal if we have sown spiritual things for you? Is it a great thing if we reap your material things? You just think about, for example, the rich man and Lazarus. How much money did the rich man have?
he
Oh,
had
I
enough.
don't know. Oodles.
He had enough. Yeah,
How much would he have paid to be saved from torment? He would have paid every dime he had. Let's look at it from another perspective. The widow with her two mites. In a sense, if she, in a sense, she did what she could.
yeah.
And if she would have had more, what do you think she would have done? I
Did
think
what
she
she?
would have given more.
Yeah,
And it's like, how much do you think Mary Magdalene appreciated Jesus casting out those demons? How much do you think Mary and Martha appreciated Jesus raising Lazarus? How much do you think Saul of Tarsus appreciated having his sins forgiven? How much you just go down the list, all the faithful
yeah,
Christians, how much do you think they appreciated the gospel, the power of God unto salvation? Do you think they ever thought, do you think they ever thought, see, and this is the issue. This is one of the issues. People talk about preachers and they disconnect preachers from the preaching of the gospel. They disconnect preachers from the gospel.
yeah,
And the issue is not, well, we just don't think a preacher should make that. The question is, how much do you value the gospel? That's the question. And if you only value the gospel a little bit, well, you probably have an issue. You probably have an issue.
yeah,
But with all this, Paul says, yes, I had that right. I had that right to be supported by you, and I'm not taking a dime from you because I know what you'll say if I do. That church in Corinth, they were going to say, he's just doing it for the money.
yeah,
I've known preachers like that. Daniel, you know who I'm talking about when I say this. I won't say his name. And a preacher I know of has never gotten a raise, really, in in about 30 years now. He's never gotten a raise. And I was talking with him recently, and he made the point. He said the reason he's never asked for a raise is because he never wanted the brethren to say he was doing it for the money.
yeah,
Now, that was a decision he made, and we were speaking pretty candidly about it. And sort of like Paul in Second Corinthians when Paul says, "Did I sin by humbling myself?" And what Paul was wondering was here with Corinth specifically. He's like, "Did I make a mistake?" What Paul is saying is, should I have gotten you to invest yourself in the gospel?
yeah.
He didn't, and he's wondering because he has this liberty.
Right, right.
So he's wondering if he chose the right path. And it's an interesting thing to think about, especially from a preacher's perspective. So anyway, so that's what he's talking about. It's like we didn't use this right. There's others there who are utilizing, who are using this right. And so he's wanting them to think about others like he has thought about them, to deny themselves for the sake of others. What else you got to add to all that, Daniel? Daniel, I'm sorry I've talked.
No, you're
I even
fine.
say I talk too much, too much.
Yeah,
Oh, be quiet.
no comment.
You're giving me the stink eye.
No, no, again, there's a value. where we, as members of the church, we're to value one another and understand each one has an important role. And some people are able to do some other things. And for instance, in the preaching of the gospel, there are some people that are able to do it, uh, some people are able to do that and they have the right to be able to make a living off of everything. And again, members will value it. Preachers are to value each member as
Yeah,
well.
sure.
And understanding this, there's times where you might not be able to be blessed as in a physical way with the congregation at times. There for us, you and I both are in the same boat where we are able to receive outside support. We're very fortunate and blessed to be able to help that. That way we can be able to continue to try to give our attention in preaching the gospel. Being able to do those things. It's
Yep.
important for both sides to be able to understand that relationship and value one another, and that preachers have the right to be able to partake of the physical things, as do the members as well. But again, let's value the gospel, as you as
Yeah.
you as you point out. Put the value on the gospel, not the individual, because as you point out, that's where we begin when we take away the preacher from the gospel message. Now we're just looking at him as you said, as an employee. Look at
Oh,
how much they're doing, or they only work 4 hours a week, or they do. You start getting comments like that. What we see, we only see them at the pulpit or at the podium. They're only teaching class and
yeah,
preaching 2 lessons, and if we're worshiping together 4 different times or Bible study and worship, it's only an hour, 4 hours a week. And I've heard that comment before from people, and some people just kept on saying it as trying to be a big joke. And finally, it got to the point where I was like, I don't really appreciate the joke or the humor behind it anymore because, again, that turned into people looking at you as an employee rather than an actual fellow member of the church.
yeah. Daniel, you go out and you see, I don't even like some of this terminology, but just for the sake of saying it, you go and you try out someplace.
Yeah.
And pretty often we get asked two questions. And what are the two questions when you go try out someplace?
How
Did you,
much? Oh,
before we get there,
oh,
what college did you go to?
yeah.
Are you married? Those two questions. I was just thinking about this passage in last week's passage. Food does not commend us to God. Neither if we eat are we the better, nor if we do not eat are we the worse. Right? That's
Right.
lib that's a liberty. And so I was thinking about another passage in Romans where it says, the kingdom of God is not eating and drinking. What is it? But peace and joy and righteousness. And the point is, the kingdom is not. So I think you can show that with each liberty. The kingdom is not this school or that school. The
Yeah.
kingdom is righteousness and joy and peace. The kingdom is not, this amount of money or that amount of money.
Yeah.
It's like the kingdom is righteousness and joy and peace. You focus on what matters. Those issues you have to make a choice in. And so
Right.
you consider others, and that's what Paul's doing. But I just think it's interesting that what brethren very often focus on are not the things that should be focused on. Are you married? Well, Paul wasn't married. Would you
Right.
have Paul as your preacher? Where did you go to school? Well, Peter didn't go to school. Would you have Peter as your preacher? Or do you demand certain things?
Right. And that disqualifies you today with some of those.
Yeah.
It
Yeah. And
disqualifies you. Especially with the first one. Where did you go to school at? Well, uh, you didn't go to Florida College.
right.
I didn't go to Florida College. You went to South Arkansas, I
Yeah.
believe, is where you got your degree from, and I got mine from a tech college in Dayton.
Now, could you go to FC? Sure,
Yeah.
you could.
But then the other side of it is, not just people looking at church, but then people that are going into those colleges are expecting people. Hey, I'm going to FC. You
Right.
know, I expect people to be able to hire me as their preacher. Go in, get their degree, and then next thing you know, well, I'm a preacher. Well, that's not the case. That's not how it works.
Yeah. What makes someone a preacher is not where they went to school. What makes them a preacher is what they preach,
Yeah,
the
what they,
gospel.
yeah.
The kingdom of God is righteousness and joy and peace.
How are people going to know God and Christ without someone being sent to them?
Right.
That's Romans 10.
Right.
Doesn't mean, you're sent. You're called out, you're sent
Yeah.
to be able to preach the gospel. Doesn't matter with those things. Let's
Yeah.
value the gospel. Let's hold the gospel to that high standard and banner.
Yep. Verse 16. For if I preach the gospel, I have nothing to boast of, for necessity is laid upon me. Woe is me if I do not preach the gospel. For if I do this willingly, I have a reward, but if against my will, I have been entrusted with a stewardship. What is my reward then? That when I preach the gospel, I may present the gospel of Christ without charge, that I may not abuse my authority in the gospel. He's not saying you shouldn't be supported by the gospel. He's saying he had denied himself that right.
Right.
And
Right.
by the way, while he denied himself, like he says in Second Corinthians, that passage I read a little bit ago, he says, I robbed other churches. Other churches were supporting him. The Corinthians
Macedonia and
were
other
not.
places in Achaia, other places besides Corinth.
Yeah, Philippi was.
Yeah.
Yep. Verse 19, for though I am free from all men, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win the more. To the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might win Jews. To those who are under the law, as under the law, that I might win those who are under the law. To those who are without law, as without law, not being without law toward God, but under law toward Christ, that I might win those who are without law. To the weak I became as weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. Now this I do for the gospel's sake, that I may be partakers of the gospel, or that I may be partaker of it with you. Do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may obtain it. And everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we for an imperishable crown. Therefore I run thus, not with uncertainty. Thus I fight, not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest when I preach to others, I myself should become disqualified. You know that word temperate there in verse 25? I think really that's what we're talking about. We're talking about self-control,
Right.
self-control, self-denial, and the race that we run, sort of like the business analogy before, it's like don't look at the church like a business and don't look at our race like a worldly race. It's like no, in a worldly race, it's like I want to beat everybody else.
Right.
In our race, we all want to cross the finish line together. And so deny yourself for the sake of others.
Yeah. And
Run in
so,
such a way that you may obtain it, but ultimately that is seen in temperance, self-control, and you're looking out for others is
and
what
what
you
did
do.
Paul do? Well, he became, to the Jews, he became as a Jew to be able to relate to them, to get them to understand the importance of the gospel message, to be able to be obedient, to run in this race. To the Gentile, he became like a Gentile.
So
He talks about
can
his
you
Romans.
can you give an example of how he to the Jew he became a Jew? Can you think of any
I
examples
would
of
I
that?
would think when you read that I was thinking about the ability to be able to relate. Now Paul was very unique in some of the things. He was taught by Gamaliel, so he's able to relate to the Jews in understanding the law and being able to go with those different things through his teaching, through his learning from Gamaliel. He's also being able to say he was a Pharisee, being able to make that claim that he might be able to win the Jews, that he might be able to help win others. And to those that, those that were without law, those that were not under the law, the
Gentiles. Yeah,
Gentiles, everyone else that's not a Jew. That's what he's getting at when he talks about the law. He's not talking about the being without the law of God because we have to be
right,
obedient to the law of God.
right.
But under the law of Christ, we have the ability for all people to be saved. And so he became like the Gentile. He became a Roman citizen and being able to talk about his Roman citizenship to be able to be more effective with those individuals. He had a little bit of that divergency, so to speak, of being able to relate to both sides of things. And the whole point of it, as he says, is that I might be able to save some. He actually has that contention with Peter and James and John, the pillars there in Galatians 2. And, well, they're going to go to the Jews. I'm going to go to the Gentile. Let's do what we can, but let's do it for the work of God. Let's be effective in what we can. As a preacher, we're able to relate to that's part of our work is being able to relate to different people as well. Jesus did it through the parables, being able to get understanding and being able to relate to people, especially with the Jews. That's who he primarily spoke to. But our ability to be able to help win more souls. It's the gospel message. Let us be brought together and let's be able to relate to one another. Let's be able to partake together in the gospel message together. That saves us all. That we might be able to, he said, I became weak To help win the weak, I became all things, all men, that I might be able to save some in verse 22.
A few different specifics that he did. He took Timothy and had Timothy circumcised.
Yes,
Well,
because of the
they,
sake of those that were around him.
right,
But then, as well, in the case of Titus,
right,
Titus was with him, and Titus was not compelled to be
right.
circumcised because of the people that he was around.
So it was a liberty, but the moment you start trying to bind a liberty, you've gone too far.
Right.
And so they denied themselves in the case of Timothy, and Timothy was circumcised. That's not the only case. You remember where Paul had taken the vow about not cutting his hair,
Yes.
and then
Yes.
he goes in and actually talks about him sacrificing.
Right.
He was doing those things because all of those Jews had their eyeballs on him.
Right.
And so to the weak, he became as weak. And I would say that was like the Jewish dietary things, some of those different issues like Sabbath keeping. He's like some of those things he was keeping not because of the old law, but because it's a liberty.
Right.
But to the Gentiles, he's like, listen, we're not bound by those things. Daniel, to wrap things up, in Galatians 4, he speaks about the same thing. Do you remember in Galatians where he says, Brethren, I urge you to become like me, for I became like you?
Yeah.
And it's like these things, the old law has been done away with. Now, to the weak, to the Jews who are still holding these things, I'm going to do everything I can to win over my Jewish brethren.
Right.
Anything I can do, I'm going to do it. Now, to the Gentiles, I'm going to do everything I can so that they can understand they don't need to go back to the old law.
Right. And I think some of this is also being able to answer the question. Going back, I know I'm backtracking some, but going back to the first chapter of this book, there was division.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think this is also, I don't know what you feel about it, but I think some of this is also kind of addressing that division problem of saying
sure.
I'm trying to win all because
Right, right.
Peter, he was working with the Jews. So you got the Jewish brethren that are sitting there kind of, hey, I'm a follower of Peter. You got Apollos, who probably was working with the Gentile a little bit more because he went to Corinth, especially. Paul's kind of in that hybrid mode of everything. And Christ came into the world and gave his life for all people. He's kind of addressing some of that divide once again. And I'm going to do what I can to win both, that I might save some in being able to help others turn to God.
Yeah. And that's what it's all about. It's just self-denial, temperance. You
Yep.
don't have to use every right you have.
Right.
You don't stand up and say it's my way or the highway when it comes to liberties. It's like, no, it's not my way or the highway. It's, friend, how can we go together?
Yeah.
How can we go together and have unity and peace and joy in the Lord? How can we do that? I'll restrain myself. Hopefully, you'll restrain yourself, and we'll be able to be saved together.
Right.
That's the idea. Can I win? Can I win anybody? Can I win anybody? Daniel, appreciate the study.
Appreciate it as well. You look at verse 24 down to verse 27. I think that this kind of also kind of leads segue into chapter 10. We'll probably revisit a little bit of verse 24 down to verse 27 when we get to the first half of chapter 10 about discipline ourselves, and he begins to make
Yeah.
comparison to Israel and their lack of discipline.
I discipline myself lest I should become disqualified.
Right.
And what happened to a lot of Israelites?
Is that they got disqualified from
They
being
got
able to.
disqualified.
Yeah.
They dropped
Okay.
dead in the wilderness because they disobeyed God.
Yeah. So we'll probably be talking about that a little bit, these first four verses kind of leading into chapter 10, Lord willing, next week.
Yep. Appreciate you.
Appreciate it as well.
Yep. Hope you have a good week. Appreciate everyone tuning in, and we hope you join us next week for another episode of Looking to Jesus.
Thank you.